Okay, so as I promised, I'm going to give you guys a quick lesson on the rhetorical strategies that you can use when you're trying to convince people to take your side in an argument, and which are deployed a lot, especially towards the end of Antigone. I mean, basically the whole play is just Creon and Antigone, and I guess to a lesser extent Haemon and Ismene, just sort of arguing about policy, and they use a lot of different techniques to do that. So this is a little quick thing. I want to show you guys this video of Greta Thunberg addressing the UN. This was from a few months ago. I want you to, as you're watching this, think a little bit about the words and phrases that she's using that work for you as an audience member, and the ones that don't work for you as an audience member, thinking about what her ultimate purpose is and how she uses things like emotion and logic or facts, and her own authority as somebody who knows things about climate activism and things like that, in order to convince you. Okay, so I'm going to let this play. You'll do a little bit of reflection, and then we'll talk a little bit about Antigone.
Greta, your first climate strike was a lonely event a little over a year ago, and in the intervening time you have sparked the interest of millions, literally, of children around the globe, demanding action for climate change. What's your message to world leaders today?
My message is that we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. The popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees and the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control. 50% may be acceptable to you, but those numbers do not include tipping points, most feedback loops, additional warming hidden by toxic air pollution, or the aspects of equity and climate justice. They also rely on my generation sucking hundreds of billions of tons of your CO2 out of the air with technologies that barely exist. So a 50% risk is simply not acceptable to us, we who have to live with the consequences. To have a 67% chance of staying below a 1.5 degrees of global temperature rise, the best odds given by the IPCC, the world had 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit back on January 1st, 2018. Today that figure is already down to less than 350 gigatons. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions? With today's emissions levels, that remaining CO2 budget will be entirely gone within less than 8.5 years. There will not be any solutions or plans presented in line with these figures here today, because these numbers are too uncomfortable and you are still not mature enough to tell it like it is. You are failing us. But the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say we will never forgive you. We will not let you get away with this. Right here, right now, is where we draw the line. The world is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not. Thank you.
So, hello, here I am. We just heard that speech that Greta Thunberg gave in front of the UN committee a few months ago. And that was a speech that got a lot of news coverage. I think whenever she speaks, she gets a lot of coverage. But one thing that we do need to think about when we're consuming a speech like that, or any sort of piece of persuasive writing, whether that's again a speech by an activist or a politician, a letter to the editor of your local newspaper, your college application essay, letters of recommendation, an email asking for more time on an assignment, anything along those lines, you need to think about ways in which the author of that text is trying to persuade you that he or she is right. So we break that down into three different, what we call logical appeals or rhetorical appeals. Rhetoric is, again, just the simple art of persuasion through speech and writing. So the three appeals, and I know you guys have been working with this on that handout that I gave you, are appeals to ethos, appeals to logos, and appeals to pathos, or pathos. I always pronounce it pathos, but I'm not sure if I'm right about that. And quite simply, ethos refers to the speaker's authority. A good example of that, I think, would be how, in these pandemic times that we're in, you've got these briefings from the White House where President Trump will speak and say different things about the political response to the pandemic, and then he's almost always backed up by medical personnel. Dr. Fauci is there, Dr. Birx is there, the guy from the CDC whose name I can never remember is there, the Surgeon General is there, and one or all or some of them will speak and use their authority as medical doctors and epidemiologists to give a little bit more gravitas to the proceedings. And what that does, the effect that has is it tells you, okay, this is somebody who is trained in these matters. We should really be listening to them. So think back again to Antigone. Think about in the very beginning of the play when Creon is making his proclamation, he is digging into his authority as king of Thebes. Even though he's only been king for a short time, he still does have that authority, and people are expected to listen to him. And Antigone, who's challenging him, really doesn't have that authority. She's a young woman who happens to be the former princess, but doesn't really have that same kind of authority. Or when Haemon is arguing with his dad, he doesn't really have that same kind of authority. He can't really make that point with that appeal to ethos, except for that moment when he says, look, I've been traveling around in town and everybody's telling me that you're wrong. So that's one of those appeals. Okay, so that's ethos, the appeal to authority. An appeal to logos or logic is when you refer to just hard facts and numbers and statistics to help make your point. That's when you are, for example, writing your research paper and you include evidence from the text. Those are appeals to logos. If you turn in an 8-page research paper with no textual evidence, you have made no appeals to logos, and that's not going to fly. A good piece of rhetoric will include appeals to ethos, logos, and pathos in various combinations, depending on the purpose of the writing and the audience that you're addressing it to. The last one would be an appeal to pathos. Pathos is emotions. It's the heart. If you want to think of logos is the brain. Ethos is the mind, sort of like your consciousness of who is speaking. Pathos is just the direct appeal to the heart and to the feelings. Okay, so that's those. If you ever see those commercials for the ASPCA, and you've got that music by like Sarah McLachlan and the really sad abused animals, and it's like, please donate to help the animals and all that. That's appeal to pathos. When Greta Thunberg gets up in front of the UN and is saying, we're never going to forgive you for messing this up, blah 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 blah, that's an appeal to pathos. When Haman is telling his dad, I'm never going to listen to you again, you're not, like that kind of stuff, that's pathos. So when you're creating one of these pieces of rhetoric, a persuasive speech or text, you really need to think about how you're going to use all three of these things in concert. Again, it's going to depend on the purpose. A research paper about literature, you're going to need less of an appeal to pathos, maybe a little tiny bit just to get your audience interested. Certainly a lot of logos to show that you're backing up your ideas, but also ethos to show that you're an authority on it. You want to show us you've read a painful case 15 times and you know where all the ins and outs of that piece, and you're able to really deploy them. When you're creating a commercial trying to get somebody to buy a product, you probably want to appeal to pathos. Get people feeling like they will feel better about themselves if they own this product. I actually want to show you guys another quick video about how you can use these three appeals in advertising. It's a little dated. The commercials are a little bit old, but it's worth taking a look at. So let me show you guys that, and then I'll sign off for now. And hopefully you'll have a chance to review this on your own, and we'll reach out with any questions that you might have. Let me share my screen. Okay, next one. And here we go. I'm going to show you this video.
The Art of Rhetoric, Persuasive Techniques in Advertising. Persuasive techniques appear in a variety of media, from a high school debate, to a built-in ad on a mobile app, to a brightly lit billboard on the street. Regardless of the mode of communication, the goal often remains the same: convince the audience of your point of view. That point of view may be political, informative, or is often simply, hey, buy this product instead of that one. Authors of a written persuasive essay use similar strategies. They make emotional appeals, build credibility and trust, and use logic and reason, all to convince the reader that their perspective is believable and true. Greek philosopher Aristotle used three terms to describe these rhetorical strategies: pathos, logos, and ethos. Not every advertisement will use all three of these techniques, but most use at least two to persuade the consumer to invest in a product or idea. We'll first start by taking a look at advertisements that feature pathos. An argument using pathos will attempt to evoke an emotional response in the audience. Before we get into advertising, let's envision this as a persuasive essay.
Imagine that you failed a math test because your school's strict anti-cell phone policy kept you from using your calculator app. Or that your sister gives birth to your baby nephew, but you have no idea because your teacher won't let you check your text messages.
Notice how this essay attempts to evoke two emotions: the fear of failure and the anxiety of missing out on important news, in order to persuade you. Now let's take a look at how this could work in advertising. Notice how the following ads want you to associate happiness or fun with their product. In fact, with a Happy Meal, it's right there in the name. These food-related ads have a pretty good idea of how you can satisfy your hunger.
Have your next burger with a side of awesome. The one-of-a-kind creamy blend of sweet and tangy. Miracle Whip, and proud of it.
Some ads attempt to tug at the heartstrings. What's a more effective way to sell Google? Showing you how to look up a recipe for meatloaf, or...
Hello. Bonjour.
Très très mignon. Allô?
Le commandant et toute son équipe espèrent que vous allez passer un agréable.
How touching. One of the most obvious uses of pathos is the claim that a product can make you more attractive, such as in this ad for Axe body spray. Advertisers also know that you have an emotional investment in your own health.
So you can have your chips and eat well too.
Some products promise to provide relief from pain.
Stops pain before it gets worse. Nothing works faster. New fast-acting Advil.
The second persuasive technique we'll talk about is logos. Logos is a logical appeal. An argument using logos uses logic and reason to persuade the audience. Logos uses statistics, facts, what a product does, how much it costs, simple logic and information. Notice the reference to very specific statistics in this excerpt from a student essay.
Studies have shown that student GPA increases by an average of 1.2 points per semester when schools lift the ban on cell phone usage.
This commercial for Kashi tells you what's in it. Notice the fine print. The Dole website contains nutrition facts. The Arm & Hammer toothpaste commercial shares what the product does and adds a little website information for you also.
Try armandhammer.com today.
This Lexus hybrid commercial contains details and statistics.
Estimated 42 miles per gallon have saved nearly 300 million gallons of gas, are up to 90% recyclable and include plant-based materials, and are on their 6th generation of technology.
The final persuasive technique we'll examine is ethos. Ethos is an appeal to credibility. An argument using ethos attempts to convince the audience that the creator of the message can be trusted. Again, let's look at a sample of persuasive writing and see how this connects. Notice that the author here is attempting to establish her credibility by proving that we can trust her.
This is my 4th year as a student at Madison High School. I've been the president of National Honor Society, captain of the Technology Committee, and very active in show choir.
Ethos in advertising is often demonstrated by the use of experts to establish credibility. This vintage ad lets us know that hospitals trust Pepto-Bismol, so you should too.
Upset, stomach upset, stomach upset.
It's time for Pepto-Bismol, time for hospital-tested Pepto-Bismol.
Yes, and actual hospital tests prove that Pepto-Bismol works where soda and alkalizers fail.
This website assures us that Tylenol is doctor recommended. But of course, the experts don't always get it right. Sometimes the experts in an advertisement are real people, giving real testimonials.
Tired of proving it.
That's real cat urine. And we've gathered a group of cat owners to see what they smell.
I don't smell this at all.
Wow.
I don't smell any urine at all.
Febreze tells us that real people, not actors, experience how their product
Febreze
works.
Air Effects and let in real people.
I'd say it was very pleasant.
Flowers everywhere. Febreze did a really great job. Impressive.
Febreze Air Effects eliminates tough odors for good.
Sometimes ethos in an advertisement doesn't come from real people or experts. It comes from celebrities. Simply associating a celebrity with a product can convince people to make that choice. Tim Tebow doesn't design cell phones. Robin Williams doesn't make Snicker bars. And Taylor Swift might not even drink Diet Coke. But their simple presence in advertising is meant to persuade you.
Radiant skin, a good night's sleep, and a vino.
It's Friday. It's time to get this party started. Wow! MJ in the house of hell!
Tags are annoying, so we got rid of them. New Hanes tagless underwear. Go tagless.
Pathos, logos, and ethos. Defined by Aristotle over 2,000 years ago, and still found in all modes of persuasion.
Okay, so that was a quick overview of the 3 rhetorical appeals, possibly how to win an argument. As you finish reading Antigone, what you'll be doing for the next assignment for next week, I want you to pay special attention to those logical appeals. I want you to make sure you're completing that homework activity. And then when we begin reading All Quiet on the Western Front, which I will give to you guys next week, I will give you a copy of that. What I want you to do is pay attention to how the various adults in the book are able to use these logical appeals and rhetorical appeals, I should say, to convince the young men who are the main characters in the book to support their cause. That's it. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions you might have. I hope you enjoy your long holiday weekend, and I will talk to you guys on Tuesday.